Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the Global Data Center Facility Summit 2023. This forum is hosted by Huawei Data Center Business, and I'm Naomi Lloyd, and I'm delighted to be here with you as your host for this afternoon. So thank you for joining us in Monaco, and thank you to those of you watching remotely as this event is being live streamed. So let's get the event underway, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Mr. Swen Xiaofeng, the President of Huawei Data Center Facility and Critical Power Business, who's going to be giving his welcome speech. Do join me in welcoming him onto the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Global Data Center Facility Summit 2023 in Monaco. It's a great pleasure to be here today. On behalf of Huawei, I would like to extend our warm welcome and sincere appreciation for your attendance. Our data center business is facing unprecedented opportunities. The data and computing power are driving explosive growth of data center business. On one hand, the data volume is increasing at a compound annual growth rate of 36% from 2020 to 2030, even though only less than 2% data are stored. The general computing power will increase 10 times by 2030, and AI computing power will increase 500 times by 2030. So I think it's not unrealistic for us to be optimistic about the future of our business. On the other hand, the low carbonization is driving the transformation of data center. Until now, more than 130 countries have announced their carbon neutrality commitments. So the data center are transforming from the power efficiency to the water efficiency to the carbon efficiency, from the efficiency factors to the green energy adoption, even transform from a power consumer role to a power generator and power enabler. So we believe that data center players will play a much bigger and better role in the carbon neutrality agenda. Huawei has long been a pioneer and veteran in the digital industry. With more than 30 years experience in digital technologies like 5G, AR, etc., we also have been working in the digital power industry for more than 10 years. So standing on the inter-exchange of digitization and low carbonization, we also restructure ourselves to better capture these opportunities. In 2021, we established Huawei Digital Power Company, which is fully owned by Huawei, but operated in an independent manner. Now we have more than 10,000 employees, and 60% of them are working in the R&D. We have 12 R&D centers worldwide. So our business portfolio covers solar power, power storage, data center facilities, critical power for industries, and EV components. Last year, we reached $7.2 billion revenue, which is about 60% growth compared with the year before. In 2023, we are expecting another 50 to 60% growth. The growth we made and the confidence we have come from the trust and support from our customers and partners, and also from our unique value proposition we believe we have. And we want to combine the digital technologies and power electronics technologies together so we can create unique value for our customers. This is our unique value proposition. In terms of data center, we've done more than 1,000 medium to large projects with our partners together, serving more than 14 gigawatts in various sectors, including co-location, finance, telecoms, manufacturers, etc. Our future-proof data centers concept is GSSR: green, simple, smart, and reliable. At this summit, we'll introduce you our latest innovative solutions and launch our cutting-edge power supply products. Looking ahead, Huawei is eager to join hands with all community members to drive the transformation of data centers to be green, simple, smart, and reliable. We also hope that through this summit, we can exchange ideas and insights and jointly promote the sustainable development of the data center industry. Ladies and gentlemen, let's work together to build a thriving, sustainable future of data center industry. Once again, thank you for your participation, and I wish you a wonderful time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Swen Xiaofeng, for an inspiring start to our summit. We can get a real sense there of the rapid development of Huawei's data center facility business. It's time now to hear from our next speaker, and I'd like to welcome Stephen Beard, who's the partner and global head of data centers for Knight Frank. He's going to be sharing his European market insight for data centers. So let's join me in welcoming him onto the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Beard, Co-Global Head of Data Centers at Knight Frank, and we provide occupational development and investment advice to customers, co-location operators, and investors around the world. We've been asked to give a 15-minute overview on the current state of the data center market here in Europe. We'll touch on Tier 1, Tier 2, and emerging markets, their performance over the last 12 months, and the outlook going forward, before moving to the future Cloud AZ regions, the shortfall in available high-voltage electrical power, and remembering latency, ready-for-service dates, and ESG. Please do feel free to reach out to me or anyone in the team should you have any questions, require advice, or wish to access our free quarterly research reports. So, let's take a look at the EMEA Tier 1 markets as they stand. Today's Tier 1 markets recorded 600 megawatts of take-up over the course of 2022, which was circa 12% down on the previous year and 20% down on 2020, both of which perversely benefited during the COVID years. However, even in light of the negative impacts caused by COVID, the continental recession, and the continued debt market volatility, we do expect take-up to rise to 675 megawatts this year, as we've already tracked 27% of this over the last 4 months. Perhaps of particular interest was the 200 megawatts of take-up in Amsterdam across 4 facilities. Amsterdam had an extremely quiet 2019 to 2022. I think we may need a new battery. No, we're okay. So, looking on to the Tier 2 markets, they recorded a total of 222 megawatts, not including Green Mountain's recent mega deal. But we do anticipate the disparity between Tier 1 and Tier 2 will significantly reduce over the course of this year, as Tier 2 forecasts indicate a total take-up of 420 megawatts. And on to the emerging markets. As it stands, we at Knight Frank consider Athens, Barcelona, Bilbao, Bucharest, Dusseldorf, Istanbul, Lisbon, Prague, Manchester, and Sofia as emerging. And whilst last year's take-up looks extremely light, most of these markets, at least 75% of them, will see at least a 350% rise in take-up over the next 12 months. Now, before moving on, we must touch on rents, specifically hyperscale rents. Yes, they are rising at long last. This is being driven by limited capacity, of course, but also by the Tier 2 cloud and traditional wholesale customers who are significantly increasing their IT load, which is creating a larger pool of customers, greater competition, which naturally leads to rental inflation. Supply and demand, together with immature relationships between customers and Tier 3 opcos, is leading to very interesting rental tone comparisons. Last year, we were involved in a 1.5 megawatt deployment in Romania and in London. Romania reflected a 50% premium, predominantly driven by the supply and demand imbalance. But word of warning, rental inflation will only last so long in the Tier 1 market specifically, as there are swathes of capacity coming online across all of these markets in 2025, when even the likes of London could double in size in a single day. We do, though, need to start moving away from the idea that FLAP-D are the only Tier 1 markets, and reference to Tier 2 markets needs to be further defined. Historically, Tier 2 indicated not only the size of existing plus pipeline in terms of IT, but also potential for growth from a macro geopolitical standpoint, or otherwise known as forecasted timeline for cloud penetration. Look at Oslo. Is that now Tier 1, given the recent deal that Green Mountain have done? And in reality, markets like Madrid, Warsaw, Milan, Berlin, they may have already been taken to full potential in the short term. So are they Tier 1 today but Tier 2 tomorrow? It is rather confusing. So we will be issuing a report in June which sets out a newly proposed definition guide to global tier ratings. But what is really interesting to note is that there is one single common theme in our defined emerging markets, and that's long-haul connectivity. And a bit more on that in a moment. So, the future of cloud AZs, the crystal ball. We have seen a consistent triangulation approach from US cloud throughout Europe, complementing the parent-child approach. As we continue to see mass migration onto public cloud, the building and land parcels are significantly increasing in land size and high voltage power needs. The market generally considers a minimum IT load threshold for Tier 1 markets of 50 megawatts and 25 megawatts in Tier 2, which is roughly 30,000 and 15,000 square meter land parcels, respectively, assuming a two-story, 12-meter tall data center building. Now, take it from us, it's not easy finding land parcels of this size within existing cloud AZs, which also provide viable access to HV transmission power that can be acquired for a reasonable price and have good access to both metro and long-haul fiber routes. Oh, and don't forget, they can't be exposed to any flight or flood risk, too close to residential or high-speed rail, away from chemical storage plants, petrol stations, or heavy industrial, even though we'd ideally like industrially zoned land. So you can see, with increasing competition, it really is like finding a needle in the haystack, unless you're working with the right real estate advisor, of course. But the point I'm making here is that the illiquidity of such product is forcing the expansion and creation of new cloud AZs. So, where will they be? Those emerging markets referenced earlier indicate locations with access to long-haul international fiber routes will be the likely front runners. And the commercial benefits of such can also not be underestimated. Cheaper land, readily and affordable power connections owing to limited competition start to allow those co-location operators who make early moves into new markets to see material bottom line benefit. HV power availability. It is a fallacy to assume the issues surrounding the availability of high voltage power are only experienced in the UK and Germany. The issue is a continental one. An emerging market doesn't just indicate short-term growth potential, but also indicates that market's infrastructure may be somewhat behind the curve, and securing connections at the necessary voltage level within a viable period of time are not always easy, and can lead to complex and sometimes costly power solutions through the adoption of a dual power approach, i.e. utilizing an interim medium voltage connection ahead of receiving the HV connection from the TNO. The demand isn't going anywhere, and so is it time we duly consider nuclear power, given connection dates offered by TNOs throughout Western Europe are indicating 10 to 15 years. Fusion power has the potential to be limitless, with near zero carbon emission. Clearly, we need a consistent base load generation, and solar and wind don't meet that profile. We also get the benefit of a net reduction on land take, as the power-to-land ratio is hugely efficient. And whilst it is an eye-watering, costly implementation, the increasing scale of hyperscale deployment is starting to provide for a viable return on investment. Latency. As referenced earlier, the emerging markets, and therefore perhaps some of the focus going forward, is growth within internationally connected locations. Therefore, whilst it is right to emphasize the issues surrounding ability to secure power connections, it cannot be the leading consideration. And I'd go so far as to say that if you receive a viable connection from a DNO or a TNO within a short period of time, say sub 2 years, then there's something quite wrong. Probably because no one else wants that power. Now, we at Knight Frank are seeing talk of new hyperscale developments in greater city locations. And ultimately, whilst management teams may feel they performed an amazing job in securing the land parcel for very little and getting their hands on substantive power reservation, it's probably because no one else wants to be there. In the property world, we've always said location, location, location. And over the last 2 years in the data center sector, it's been power, power, power. And we anticipate going forward, it will be network, network, network. Ready for service dates. Now, we won't spend too long on this topic, but it is becoming an increasingly important topic for our customers. And the ability for the OpCo to convince customers that they can meet their RFS dates is perhaps more important to the hyperscale than the rent being proposed. We've recently witnessed major hyperscale deployments won and lost purely based on this key point. And we anticipate a major recruitment drive on this area of the business over the next 12 months. Not only is the relationships held at a micro level between the OpCo, the local utility company, and the planning authorities important, but never more so has the relationship with global manufacturers mattered so much. If the hyperscale or large-scale enterprise wholesale have a major requirement, how does the OpCo separate itself from the pack and present a really strong offering? Cost or rent, yes, an important factor, but it's rarely material. An ESG offering, of course, but an ability to beat the competition on ready-for-service dates is extremely compelling. OpCos need to both consider their existing and future relationships with the likes of Huawei, and perhaps consider a move away from traditional blueprint design thinking. Modular forms of construction that are on order and pre-packed in advance of tenders are only subject to the time it takes to ship, and in certain cases, this can include some of the long lead items too. The recent BBC Panorama program was somewhat one-sided, as it clearly didn't highlight the positive impacts that data centers bring to society across our daily lives. But what it did highlight positively was the concerning levels of water usage. It's a big problem, and we feel it is being somewhat overlooked, whereby most stakeholders are more concerned with adopting technologies to drive down PUE. And yes, we're considering the replacement of diesel generators, looking at on-site renewable generation and installing electrical charging points. But what about one of, if not the, most important commodity, water? If you consider that one of the major hyperscalers consumed nearly 1.7 million litres of water every day last year, and forecasts indicate that by 2050, 2/3 of the world will face at least 1 month of power shortage, then the industry needs to come together quickly and enforce wholesale change by committing to zero water usage in the medium term. But while some OpCos are promoting their WUE credentials, we also need them to quantify just how much water they're bringing into the facility and discharging back into sewers unused, rather than just reporting how much they're evaporating. But there have been advancements, and when it comes to embodied carbon and the general form of construction, many people don't know, but today 90% of new co-location facilities can meet BREEAM or LEED Excellent. There's now a greater drive away from concrete towards prefab modular forms of construction, and even cross-laminated glulam wood, which has been adopted by EcoDC in Sweden. We know Microsoft and Amazon have invested in Carbon Cure, which pumps CO2 into the concrete as it sets, further reducing the emission output. We're seeing more operators committing to building with green certified steel and green certified concrete. But I would say that the investors behind the co-location operators still need to be convinced when it comes to spending more money on the development of these facilities, particularly given the rate of cost inflation, specifically in relation to MEP over the last 5 years. However, the investors haven't got a choice. They have to change their approach. And whilst it may sound perverse to suggest the desire to increase build costs in order to genuinely develop green infrastructure, the end users are crying out for it, and they'll pay a premium for the benefit. In reality, it's all relative. And by adopting a green approach, you'll be enhancing the attractiveness to the end user. Operators need to create USPs, and convincing the cloud that you can meet their ready-for-service dates is one thing, but being able to genuinely illustrate that you really do support their own carbon emission and ESG requirements is another. There are also those who are further reducing the amount of embodied carbon through actively acquiring and/or refurbishing existing or otherwise considered redundant data centers. We have to seek to qualify whether an existing shell really cannot be considered for repurposing, as we see far too many operators are too wedded to their blueprint design and simply casting off development opportunities that require just a little bit of creative thinking. That's a wasteful approach. And ultimately, this is what we believe the core issue boils down to, one of wastefulness. A wasteful attitude that does run through the spine of our industry. The end users are taking far too much space and reserving more power than they really need, which requires the data center operators to take more power and more land than they need. Some CTOs banging all their compute into one location, as it's easier to manage from an ops and contractual basis, when in reality 80% of their compute could potentially be located in the Nordics. But finally, we need to see changes to taxing of the end user. We, the population, are far too wasteful with the data that we consume on a daily basis. You know, how many are undertaking wasteful tasks online, watching wasteful videos or storing wasteful photos? Fundamentally, it starts with the end user, and we have to educate the masses that data, much like fuel and water, is a commodity. And on to the bottom line, or the final word, and it's quite simple. Those operators that choose to develop truly powered green infrastructure with access to international fiber rights, whilst building strong delivery teams in profit-making markets, will likely win this race. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen, there for sharing your insights on the green infrastructure and how clearly the data center industry is booming in Europe. Thank you very much for that. We're going to be hearing from our next speaker, who is Mr. Lee Hui-yong, and he's the General Manager, Huawei Data Center Facility Marketing Department. He's going to be giving his speech, Smart DC, Building the Green Future, Huawei's Smart Green Data Center Solution. Please join me in welcoming him onto the stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Really great pleasure to be here. It's our honor to invite all of you to join this kind of commercial summit. I would like to take about 25 minutes to share with you the Huawei's future-oriented solution and also some really amazing products. So, if we're checking our business, the common communication power is our foundation, our business. So, based on some reports, we see the general computing power's growth rate every year is like 18%, while the AI computing power the growth rate is 52. Even though we are thinking this forecast is not conservative because of the GPT technology. As we see, there's like two scenarios we need the computing power for the GPT. First is the GPT training. And as an example, for GPT 3.5, we need more than like 3,400 pflops a day. And also this kind of model iteration and the model migration will need a similar computing power. Second scenario is about talking about operation maintenance daily. Because in the service website, there's more than 660 million visitors in the January 2023. So we required more than 4,800 pflops a day for the operation. It means we need 7 to 8 data centers, especially for this service, related to 500 pflops, and it equals almost like 5 megawatts. So this is just the beginning. And we are thinking the future for this kind of data centers requirement would be really big. However, we see some changes in the industry, especially like from the government regulation for the end users' requirements. And we summarize them into 4 factors. The first is the carbon neutrality, because it's not a social responsibility or profitability, because the renewable energy utilization ratio and the PUE will define if we can get the permission of the data center or the equals end users. And the second is about the business agility. So the time to market is really a key point in the competition. So if we can build a data center in 6 months, and while others needed 18 months, what was the result? And the third is talking about operation and maintenance. Because now the data center is moving 100 racks to the 1,000 racks, and moving a single room building to a campus. But we are lacking the people of operation and maintenance, especially in the emerging market. And the last one is talking about the service reliability. And it's not the least, because any single incident will impact 100 million people's daily life. So the service availability would be our foundation of our service. So keep these 4 factors in mind. And Huawei decided and communicated with different experts and also organizations. We give our answer would be the GSSR. The green, simple, smart, and reliable. So this is our future-oriented data centers opinion. When we're talking about green, the first should be the energy saving. When talking this one, it's not only considering renewable energy, but also considering the power system and the cooling system efficiency. Of course, in the data center, we have a special resource we call space, because space saving should be also a requirement for the future data center. Of course, as just mentioned, water. And also, we need to manage all the carbon's footprint in every aspect, especially like modification, even the construction and the transmissions. So this is green. And second, we're talking about simple. Because if you're checking the data center, the main idea is the deployment and the maintenance. So if we can change the deployment into a, to product business, because now the data center is normally a project, right? If we can put in them project into a product layer, that would be really simple. And for the maintenance, it should be required so high skills for the maintenance teams. So if we can put in the features into the maintenance, the reduced requirement for the skills for operation and maintenance, it would be easily. And the third one is about the smart. We want to introduce AI into our operation and maintenance daily life. In this way, we can visible the whole system, and also we can do the automatically inspection. Because for now, we have to check in every data center maybe in 4 hours. And the last one is reliable. This one should be like building the reliable architecture, but also we need to change some opinion. Because normally we will find the problem and solve the problem. So is there any way to, before the problem happens, we solve it? We call it preventive protection. So with this GSSR principle, we need to put in these rules or principle into our data center. But if we are checking in the data center, the power system and the cooling system is really important. So let's say one by one. First, let's check in the power system. As we know, the IT density is increasing from 4 kilowatts per rack to now 12, even 16. So in the 4 kilowatts per rack, that moment, the power room only takes like 1/4 of the white space. But if you reach the 8 kilowatts, it means the power room will take like 1/2 of the white room. And when we reach the 16, it means the power room is almost similar as white space. Imagine that when you buy a space, and the one part is the white space, which is okay for the rack, but another one is a power system. So the usage of space is really not good. So our suggestion is to using the compact power system. To reach like this target, maybe first we need to use the high density of the UPS, from 30 kilowatts to 50 kilowatts, or even to 100 kilowatts. Or maybe in the future, it's 150. And the second, we can also optimize the structural layout. Maybe we can redefine some components and to reuse the current space we have in the equipment, such like in UPS cabinet. If you check in current UPS, we have so many spaces there. So if we define some load switch and putting them inside, maybe this is a good way. And third one is talking about integrated different elements into one system. Just like iPhone, they put in like airport, like the internet, and also the phone together as one product. And if we can put in the power system's different elements into one system, we can reduce the connections. So based on our practice, if we do this operation, the total space can reduce more than 30%. So this is about space. And the second, we're talking about the efficiency. Efficiency always be the hottest topic in the power system. And we know that every 1% of the efficiency improved, the POF or the POE will be reduced 0.01. And also, we know that since 2011 until now, the efficiency is not moving so much. It's always like from 96 to the 97. It's really hard to improve. So if we want to do things, it's not only considering the UPS, but also considering the power system. So that's the reason we need to think in the end-to-end, the power system efficiency improvement. And maybe first is to reduce the transmission path, because before we always need so long kind of cables. So if we can use the cable, busbar, and maybe it's only like 10 meters instead of 30 meters. So this will be improved. Maybe it's a little. But second, we are considering to reduce the conversion levels. Because before, we always using like AC, DC, and DC, AC, 3 levels. And if we have technology, can directly have only 1 level, so the efficiency will be really improved. Because here, needed a really technology we call the 0 milliseconds switch over. And now with the R&D's development, how we solve this problem, so we can improve the efficiency of the power system. And the third one, we can also like to improve the efficiency of the like different models, like DC-AC model or AC-DC model. So with all these methods, we can improve the end-to-end the proficiency from 95 to 98. So this is also our practice. And the third one is reliable. Because for the reliable, we need to see what happened. So if you check in the problem happening, always be the power system. And if you go in more detail, the power system is because of the UPS system. And if you go in more detail again, okay, for the UPS failure, it's always the top key components, such like the fan, the capacitors, or the batteries. So if we want to improve this kind of the reliable, maybe we need to use better fan and better capacitors. but also we can change some other mind. And we can find out when the fan or when will be the capacitors have some problem. We can solve it before the problem happens. This we call preventive protection. And also, a reliable product is designed instead of the maintenance. So we are thinking from the components level and the device level and the system level. For the components, if we have problem, you could be easily to replacement and should be very quick, maybe in 5 minutes. And for the device level, should be have the redundancy. Any point have some problem, we can not impact the system. Also, as a system, you should be have the visible in the whole link. So through this way, we can improve the reliable. So for the space, efficiency, and reliable, in fact, we already doing this kind of job since many years ago. In 2015, we integrated the UPS and the power distributed cabinet together. We launched PowerPod 1.0. And in 2018, we integrated more elements, improved the efficiency, space, and reliable. And many customers accept this solution and like it. So now, more than 2,400 megabit watts is accepted using this solution. But we didn't stop. We continuously to developing on the space and the efficiency and the reliable. And also, we are considering the requirement from the Europe, like Form 4B and the installation against the wall. And today, we bring the PowerPod 3.0. Let's see it. So how do you think this PowerPod 3.0? It's really preferred power system solution for the large DCs. And it's totally designed based on the GSSR. As we say, it's really like green. The space usage is less than like 30%. Before, maybe you need like 18 cabinets. Now it's only 10. And the efficiency is before maybe 95.4. Now we can reach 98.4. So, and also, this equipment is really fully prefabricated and using the bus bar. So you don't need to the cabling installation in the site. And the time to market could be like only 2 weeks instead of 2 months. And also, we put in so many temperature sensors in the bus bar, more than 150. Of course, every UPS, we have like 50 or 6 temperature sensors. So in this way, you can have the visible, the whole link of the power system. And also, we launched this function for the preventive protection for the fan and also the capacitors. So all these functions, we're putting them together, we call it PowerPod 3.0. And if you know this product and you use this product, I'm totally sure you will like it, okay? So this is a power system. And also, we are thinking the cooling system is very important. Because if you're checking the 10 years TCO about the cost, the electric will always be big. And if you go into detail, besides IT, and the cooling system requires more than 26% of them. So if we want to reduce the cost, so improve the cooling system efficiency is also important. And if we want to solve this issue, maybe we need to go back to the basic theory. If the environment temperature is very low, what should we do? From our perspective, it would be really preferred to using the convection heat transfer instead of the reserve racking cycle. Because in this way, the heat will automatically go from the hot to the cold, and no need the refrigerator work. This will save the power. And the second, it would be suggested to improve the supply temperature. And in this way, we can have more time to using the free cooling, because this also related with IT environment. And the third one, maybe using AI. Because AI is popular, we also should to reuse and maximize the value of this technology. So based on our practice, if we're using these three technology, the COF can be reduced from 0.3 to 0.1. And as I just mentioned, so if the environment temperature is low, we really suggest and strongly suggest the IEC solutions. Because in this way, we can using more time of free cooling. As an example, in Ireland, we can using more than 8,700 hours for the free cooling. And the PUE can go in as low as 1.15, while the WE is only 0.37. Besides that, the IEC solution is also very reliable because it's distributed architecture. And then any problem happened for this one solution will not impact the whole system. And also, it's very simple because we put in all the key components as a modular. You can replace it as just a hot swap, and maybe you can finish it in like 5 minutes. So this is IEC. It's really good, right? But it also has some limitation. Because if the temperature is very hot outside, if this is a building, the IEC is not able to installation. So we have to go back to the chilled water solution. And the chilled water solution at that moment would be selected and preferred. And of course, we also should improve the efficiency of this system. One way is to improve the chiller's efficiency, or we're using AI. But today I want talking about the temperature. Because before, the IT server is so sensitive. That's the reason we're always using very low temperature of the IT room. But now, the IT server is improved. Now it can supporting from 10 degrees to 35. And also from the Echelon suggestion, it can able to supporting like 18 degrees to 27. So based on this, we calculated out 25 temperature supply is really a good temperature. Because if you go in higher, the IT server's cost will be higher. And also, the problem happened for the IT server will be increased. So 25 is our suggested. In this way, we increased the temperature of the water, and the efficiency and the power consumption will be reduced. So 1 degree increase and 3% of the power consumption will be reduced. So this is, we are thinking, the way to reduce the cost. And we know that in Europe and in some Asia, we already increased the temperature. So want to comply with your requirement, we also bring this kind of product. We call it smart fan wall. Let's see it. Thank you. So this smart fan wall is also designed based on GSSR. And I want to share 2 key points. First is the EC fan. In fact, Huawei is the only vendor who manufactures this kind of fan dedicated for the DC scenario. And with this fan, the air volume will be additional 45 part. And also, we are the only vendor to take out the fan's driver outside, because we analyze the problem happened for the fan. Always, more than 94% is because of the driver. So when we take it out, you have more space for the fan, and also this drive can be changed or maintained very easily. And the second I want to enhance is about the new dual model architecture. With this one, we integrated the PFC and ATS function together. And in this way, you don't need to buy additional ATS or PFC. You can reach the THDI less than 5%. And also, here is the main amazing thing is that when you have 2 input, any one input shutting down, it will be automatically switched to another one, and with 0 interruption. So if you know this detail, you will see how good it is. So this is our cooling system solutions. And we know that using the GSSR principle, we will not only for these 2 current products, but also for all the basic passes and components and products. We will divide all of them together. And using this kind of technology, we will continuously invest on the R&Ds. And we will put in more than 10% of our revenue into R&D. In last year, it's more than like $150 million for the developing. And also, we have globally 12 R&D centers to supporting our technology. So with this kind of technology supporting, and it's now more than 100 country and regional customers are selecting with Huawei. And in fact, we are supporting and serving more than 1,100 large data centers. And it almost equals 1.8 million cabinets, or like 14 gigawatts. So with this, we have so many impression cases, such like in the Middle East, we have the world's largest 100% renewable data center, and also the largest prefabric data centers. And even in the island, we can reach the 1.15 with IEC solutions. So with all this kind of the technology, we are leading in this market and to serving with you. And I'm totally sure that when we are working together with GSSR products and with your trust and selection, we can build in the green data center. And we can catch this kind of opportunity of the business. And we can build in the green future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Li Huiyong, for such an informative speech. Innovation is endless, and the launch today of those 2 new products that we've just heard about reflects Huawei's spirit of continuous innovation. So now it's the moment you've all been waiting for. We've seen the videos, and now it's the official launch. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back onto the stage Swen Xiaofeng, President of Huawei's Data Center Facility and Critical Power Business, along with Fei Zhenfu, President of Huawei Data Center Facility, onto the stage to officially launch these 2 products, the PowerPod 3.0 and Smart Fan Wall. Gentlemen, when you're ready, let's have the countdown. A moment for some official photos to remember this moment. Congratulations, the PowerPod 3.0 and Smart Fan Wall are officially released today. So thank you to both of you for this, and I invite you, when the photos are finished, I apologize, when they're finished, I invite you to take your seats again. Thank you so much, gentlemen. So now let's invite Simon McCormick, who's the CTO of Echelon Data Centers, onto the stage. He's going to be telling us about the successful strategies of Echelon Data Centers. So let's welcome him on now.
I didn't know where he's taking it down.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon McCormick. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Echelon Data Centers. I suppose I just want to begin by thanking Huawei for giving me the opportunity today to come and talk about this topic, energy in data centers. And I sort of labeled it from electricity to energy. What I'm trying to capture there is the almost paradigm shift that we're certainly experiencing in Ireland, and which we expect to see across continental Europe, that, you know, data centers aren't just there anymore to, you know, ask for a grid connection, have a right to be connected, and start running their data center. It's much more than that these days, and that's what I'm gonna dig into. So, a little bit about me. My role, it's in two parts really. The first is that I take a lead role in our interactions with our customers, both on the technical side, but also on the commercial side as well. So, you know, from when we first get the tap on the shoulder, if you like, from our customers that they want some space, all the way through to RFS, and then into the ops phase. The second part of my role is as the technical authority for the organization. So I've got responsibility for ensuring that the product that we bring to market, so to speak, is suitable for those customers, and that we've got a secure, sustainable form of power for them to run their IT load. So Echelon Data Centers itself, we are an international infrastructure developer. And we've got a real focus on the sustainability aspect. I think it's fair to say everyone is trying to work sustainability and ESG and you know, environmental considerations into their marketing piece these days. And I suppose we think we've got a real job to do to convince people that it's actually not just marketing for us. There's some real tangible efforts that we're making to make our business sustainable, and so our customers' business as well. We've currently got 6 sites in development. 4 of them are based in Ireland, and 2 of them are based in the UK. We've also got a couple of developments that are under acquisition at the moment in continental Europe. The image that you see on the right there, that's our LCY10 facility. It's based in the Isle of Dogs in London. 17 megawatts, leased to a single customer, and that went live. December last year. The one that you can see on your left, that's our Dub 10 facility. It's in West Dublin. Okay, it's our first site. It's our first campus in Dublin, and what we've got there is 3 buildings of 30 megawatts, and we've got 1 building of 18 megawatts. The first 2, as you can see, they're in construction at the moment. We've got a first handover. In October of this year. Hopefully you can make out on the screen there the cooling units that we've got. So they're actually Huawei units. We've got 288 of them going in on the campus in total. So it's 280 across the first two buildings. So that's 60 megawatts of cooling capacity that they provide. One of the key reasons that we actually selected Huawei to provide the cooling solution, two principal reasons, if you like. One is that 288 units of that size. There's not many manufacturers that were able to do that full stop, but there weren't any that were able to do it in the time frames that we were asking for. So that was really important to us in achieving our speed to market and achieving the commitments we'd made to our customers. The second bit that really attracted us was, with those units and what you see is only a quarter of them, and they serve a data hall on each level. So you can imagine with that number of units, a relatively small space, the effort that went into calculating duct sizes, into calculating flow and return speeds, that was a lot of effort, and we were really well supported by the Huawei team in working that out. So as I said, that gets handed over beginning in October. We start construction on the third building, hopefully in the summer. So by the time we get to 2025, middle of 2025, we should have all 108 megawatts live and operational on the campus. While we sort of have our goal and our mission statement, if you like, for the business as a whole, we've also developed a separate objective, if we can put it that way, related specifically to energy. So what we said is that we want to be a sustainable prosumer of energy, and for those that haven't heard the term before, it's both producer and consumer. And that's what we see ourselves as in Echelon. The old paradigm of large data center asks the system operator for a grid connection, they get it, and they live happily ever after. We think those days are over, certainly in Ireland, and I think we're going to see it in the UK pretty shortly, and it wouldn't surprise me if we go through this in the other power-constrained markets. The key part for us, though, again, is the sustainability. We're really keen to stress that sustainability isn't just a word for us, it has a meaning, and to try and give it that meaning, we sort of called out the three pillars of sustainability and try and evidence what we're doing by referencing those. So those three pillars are economic, they're environmental, and they're social. We've sometimes been accused of, particularly when it comes to the energy side of things, of shoehorning, sort of our view into those three pillars. But, as a CTO of the organization, I really do believe in what we're doing. Take social as a good example of that. I put up a picture of a battery and the transmission lines, and it's not readily apparent why that should relate to social sustainability. But how we've looked at it is that when we provide things like batteries on our site that are grid connected, they're providing a service to the wider system, and they're allowing greater penetration of renewables onto the energy system. Greater penetration of renewables gives us both carbon-free energy, which we're all striving for, but it also gives us cheaper electricity as well. Not necessarily immediately, but over the long run, renewable energy will be cheaper, which obviously has and that two-part, the reduced carbon emissions and the cheaper electricity, that is absolutely a social issue. I've also put up a picture of a gas turbine there as well under economic. Again, how can you talk about a gas turbine in the context of sustainability? Well, the way we've looked at that, we've put that into the bucket of economic sustainability. If we weren't able to develop those thermal power plants, those thermal power assets, we'd be out of business. So the Dublin site that we just talked through there, I just talked through, 108 megawatts of IT load. So let's gross that up and say 150 megawatts of power. We only had a 40 megawatt grid connection. Still only have a 40 megawatt grid connection. So what we've done to get us from the 40 up to the 150 needed is that we've installed a thermal power plant. We're in the middle of doing that at the moment, and it's going to run off gas turbines. So again, instinctively, you don't hear gas turbine and think sustainability, but it has had the very clear effect of being able to sustain our business and keep us providing allowed us to keep providing our services for longer. We do get that is a short-term solution. We absolutely buy into that, and that's why we have begun our own energy transition as well. So we went into this thinking, okay, we've got to put in these gas turbines. It's going to run our data centers for a little while, but we've got to do that transition. We've got to make the jump to the renewable energy, and I think that's probably the toughest part, right? Building a thermal power plant, while not straightforward, we've been able to get our heads around it. And the power that it provides is stable, it's dispatchable, we can turn it up, we can turn it down, we understand it. The challenge that we're now setting for ourselves is, okay, we've got to sunset those thermal assets, we've got to bring in the renewable energy. How do we do that? How do we essentially turn ourselves into a system operator ourselves? How do we take in renewable energy that's non-dispatchable? You know, we can't control it, we're reliant on the wind. How do we use that to run an asset that needs to have 24/7 clean power? It's a challenge. We haven't quite got it figured out, but that's part of our sustainability journey. The little clock down here says I've only 2 minutes left, so what I'll finish with is just talking briefly about the challenges and the opportunities that we face as a business, and not just Echelon data centers as a business, but probably all businesses and all communities on the island of Ireland are certainly where we operate. So what we need is large-scale investment from the system operators, the energy system operators. We need that because more transmission lines, more renewable assets gets us well along our road to achieving net zero by variously 2030, 2040, 2050, whatever it happens to be. So more infrastructure and large energy users like data centers can support this investment. It's not necessarily about writing the checks, so to speak, but it is probably a joined-up approach to the development of both transmission assets, cables, but also the development of things like battery storage. You know, if we can do the co-location of the renewables, the storage, and the data centers, we're well on our way to achieving that investment. Coupled closely to that then is achieving our decarbonisation targets within the timelines that we set. And what is said here is that large grid-reliant energy users like data centers can, with single movements, change momentum. So what I'm getting at here is that if I'm a data center and there's a wind farm that's looking for a PPA, as in they've got their contracted revenues at the far side, and that's what gives them their financial viability. When you're doing that with, say, a normal corporate PPA, say for a bank, just to pick an example, it's perhaps not needle moving, but a portfolio the size of Echelon's, which is, let's say a gigawatt in Ireland alone, getting that sort of momentum behind PPAs and providing, financial viability to these renewable assets is super important. And I think the last bit then is the public and private sector organizations need to collaborate more. Many of us in this room have been across the table from the authorities, the system operators in Amsterdam, in Frankfurt, in Dublin, in London. And it's quite transactional, I suppose, is the best way of describing it. and that's been the paradigm. That's been the paradigm since the electricity system was created. I think what we need to see a bit more of is the collaboration, so that the grid timelines aren't 10 years, because that's just what the system operator says it is. We need more collaboration between data centers, and we can drive that change. We can be that difference that we need. That collaboration should cut down and so sustain our businesses for the future. So that was it. Just a couple of quick thoughts, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Simon, very much for sharing those insights and strategies with us. Our next speaker, the time is flying by, is CEO of ST Telemedia Global Data Centers in the Philippines, Carlo Malana. He's going to be sharing a perspective on digital infrastructure from Southeast Asia and the Philippines. Let's welcome him to the stage now.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about our story in such a great gathering of the data center industry here in Monaco. We're all aware that data is the foundation of our digital world. Every organization I have come across in recent years have a digital agenda, if not a cloud agenda. Digital means data, and that data tends to be headed towards the cloud. We all know that this data resides in computers housed in data centers, the heart of digital, as I'd like to say. Today, I'm happy to share with you my insights on the Southeast Asian viewpoint, on the data center business, and of course, why the region, especially the Philippines, is attracting quite a bit of attention in the data center co-location space. I'll also talk a bit about our challenges and how we have come to address this in our future builds with some technology solutions. Southeast Asia includes some of the world's largest and fastest growing economies, as well as a rapidly growing middle class and an increasing demand for digital services and information. Furthermore, as the region becomes more connected and data-driven, the demand for data centers is increasing. The figures sometimes vary, but consistently is projected to outpace the rest of the world by 5%, with growth of close to 20%. A 3.5 increase in data consumption from 2020 to 2025, albeit sparked by the forced digitalization during the pandemic, is expected, with monthly usage expected to go from 9.2 gigabits in 2020 to 28.9 gigabits in 2025. Cloud spending continues to ramp up in the region, with Gartner projecting a 33% year-over-year growth by 2026. Earlier today, Sanjay and I were just discussing how less than 20% of the major applications are actually in the cloud. And there's still quite a bit of headroom to grow in that space. While the traditional data center hubs in the region are Singapore and Hong Kong, current conditions are forcing expansion to other countries in the region. In SDT, we, for example, launched some platforms in Thailand and Indonesia recently. There's a surge in demand from the major hyperscalers, most of whom will still use co-location as the main capacity augmentation strategy. The continued digital adoption by the consumers and businesses alike, including the application of IoT, will only continue this growth. The Philippines, in particular, is a prospective data center investment market. While it's likely more well-known as a tropical beach destination, colorful festivals, perhaps a BPO hub, the Philippines is positioned to become a key player in the digital economy, thanks to a young, tech-savvy population, a stable political environment, and a strategic location in Southeast Asia. Let me expound on each of them. Let's first discuss the Philippines' strategic location because of its location in Southeast Asia. The country has easy access to key markets in the area and beyond. It is the country closest to China and also has proximity to major markets like Japan, South Korea, and Australia, along with connectivity options to the US. Its position enables hyperscalers to engage with Asian consumers while also serving as a gateway to the rest of the world. The Philippines has made significant investments in undersea cables and cable landing station to improve its digital infrastructure. As Stephen from Knight Frank had mentioned, connectivity is a key component in the data center development. If you look at this chart, this actually is a map of submarine cables across the region. And if you zoom in real closely, there's a dense area and a dense path where the submarine cables pass by. And that happens to be right smack where the Philippines is. The country has multiple cable landing stations that serve as gateways to international networks, enabling faster and more reliable internet connectivity. The number continues to grow, with 8 submarine cable systems ready for service between this year and 2025, growing to a total of 22 submarine cable systems. Moreover, the government has implemented several initiatives to improve the country's digital infrastructure, such as the National Broadband Plan and the Free Wi-Fi for All program. These initiatives demonstrate the government's commitment to improving digital infrastructure of the country and making it more accessible to the public. Interestingly enough, one of the stats in the Philippines is it's one of the heaviest internet users in the world, averaging about 10 hours per day. I have no idea where people get these 10 hours, but apparently they do. Other factors include new regulations that allow up to 40% ownership of public utilities, including the power generation sector, as the hyperscalers establish increased presence in the country. The Philippines also has an advantage in terms of human capital, with a median age of only 25 years old and a country that has young and tech-savvy population. As a result, the workforce is extremely adaptive to new technologies and trends, making it an attractive place for innovation. Moreover, the Philippines has a high literacy rate and English competence, where global enterprises can easily communicate with their local counterparts. It's the 3rd largest English-speaking nation in the world. One of the reasons it has become a BPO center and can also be leveraged in the digital infrastructure field. It has a big talent pool of technical experts, such as engineers and software developers, and thousands of graduates come into the workforce from the country's colleges and technical institutions. In fact, several of the international engineering firms we work with currently in the data center industry have a large presence in the country. The Philippines has also made a strong commitment to renewable energy in recent years, recognizing the importance of reducing reliance on fossil fuels and mitigating the effects of climate change in 2020. The country announced plans to triple its renewable energy capacity so that by 2030, we have a target of generating 35% of its energy from renewable sources. It's interesting that the largest power plant in a solar power plant in Southeast Asia is actually based in the Philippines. And so there's potential for growth in this sector, especially as the government has liberalized ownership of utilities in the country. STT GDC has made a commitment to grow its data center presence in the region and in the Philippines. While Vertus has been leading the company's presence in the UK and Europe, STT GDC has recently opened facilities in Thailand and Indonesia. In the Philippines, there is a commitment to expand over 130 megawatts over the next few years, with some very detailed announcements in the very near future. As I was speaking to Stephen from Knight Frank, one of the important things he flashed out there was the reliability of a company to be able to deliver. And this is one of the differentiation factors that I hope to be able to share with you in the very, very near future. However, as we navigate over the period, over this next few years, we see a transition from co-location demands being driven primarily from enterprise and service providers to an increasing blend of hyperscalers coming into the country. ST Telemedia Global Data Centers has shown a strong commitment to sustainability in its operations, and recognizing that substantial environmental impact on data centers, we have to adjust and adapt. And the commitment is also reflected by our customers who demand a renewable energy and more efficient designs. Furthermore, there's really the reality of market pressure and pricing and costs, And I'm glad to hear that at least there's an upward trend a little bit in the rents, right? So this helps a lot of us in the industry. At STTGDC, we've been able to deploy some of the technologies in response to some of these challenges. And all of these technologies that we have are either currently deployed or already incorporated in the current designs of the builds that we're planning. We have at least 2 builds that we'll be announcing here in the next few weeks. And in our experience, some of these technologies that we've used to solve this have really been concentrated in 3 areas. We talked about battery technologies, electrical solutions, and cooling technologies. And I'm glad to hear the announcements regarding the new fan walls, because I'm sure we'll be taking a keen interest in that. We actually are one of the first installations in the Philippines for fan wall technology. We actually led the country in establishing and launching lithium-ion batteries in the data centers. In fact, you're probably very familiar with the product here because that we're using some of the advanced batteries with built-in fire suppression systems, which is critical in a lithium-ion application because there's an increase in the fire hazards for lithium-ion. So we have to balance that with a mitigation plan. And so with all these three areas, back in the electrical side, we've had to deploy an interesting mix of intelligent PDUs. And one of the challenges that we have, as I mentioned before, is this transition period between enterprise clients who have different needs and hyperscale clients. And as we do that, we have to retain this flexibility in our design and ability to say and dedicate certain space in our data centers. A key factor for that is the way that we customize panel boards, as an example. Even that very simple solution, some of the hyperscalers require branch monitoring of their equipment. And something that's straightforward and that simple needs to be in place in order for us to be viable with both enterprise and hyperscale customers. We're excited to be trialing out some new technologies in our new deployments. We talked about fan walls and the intelligent fan walls that are coming soon. And this year, we're deploying micro chillers, which will allow us to also adapt chiller technologies in our older data centers. We currently operate 4 data center platforms in the Philippines that are legacy. And so we have the challenge of the legacy data centers along with building the larger scale hyperscale data centers that we're soon to announce. In that, we've announced specifications as well for magnetic levitation chillers, which will be quite a jump in terms of the power efficiency of those chillers. And also, of course, using adiabatic technology, because we're very well aware as a company that it's not just all about PUE. We also have to watch our WUE as well. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone for your time and consideration. As we navigate the ever-changing landscape of the data center industry, let us remember that our work is not just about technology, but about empowering people and businesses to achieve their goals. We can continue to innovate and grow with the collaboration of our partners and our customers. Together, we can create a better world and enable digital. Thank you very much.
Carlo, thank you very much indeed for everything you shared with us there. And to get some more thoughts and insights on how to build a sustainable data center, we've invited some global experts from data center industries for a panel discussion. Let's welcome first the host for the panel, who is Sanjay Kumar Sayanani, Senior Vice President and CTO, Global Data Center Business, Huawei Digital Power. And our data center experts, I would like to invite them on. We have John Belton, Global Director of Development, Colt Data Center. Marcien Arts, Director, Mission Critical Facilities, Royal Hasse-Koning DHV. We have Mark Acton, Global Head of Technical Due Diligence, Future Tech. And back onto the stage, Carlo Malana, CEO of ST Telemedia Global Data Centers in the Philippines. And I'll hand over now to Sanjay for our panel discussion.
Thank you. They've just told me that we need to reduce the time for our panel discussion. I've told them yes, but let's do whatever we want to do. Because the next time I'm going to have a panel discussion at the beginning of the session. But thank you. I think we had a similar panel not so long ago in Barcelona, and I must say this, probably I'm repeating, but there's a lot of horsepower on the stage right now. We probably have, more than 130 plus years of experience in digital technology, so let's make the best of it. Now, clearly, digital technologies is no longer if you want it. It's more a must-have, pretty much, no matter where you go. And between the ubiquity of working from home to explosion of e-commerce to pretty much everything digital, innovative technologies, we heard that in the morning, machine learning, AI, so on and so forth, this is generating immense amount of data. So this part is very clear. All this data needs infrastructure, and the cornerstone is the data center facility. Now, we've heard from previous speakers, and what stood out for me was that FLAP-D market plus the emerging markets around cumulatively are in excess of 14 gigawatts of data centers. And this was not a number that we would have even thought about 10 years ago. Following the Paris Agreement, there have been emissions targets that have been set up. And clearly the targets are very aggressive. If I'm not mistaken, the target is to reduce emissions by 55% from 1990 levels. And clearly this has resulted in a rise in government regulations, legislations, regulations, and many of which are directly addressing the data center industry. Recently, EU released a draft of the EED, the Energy Efficiency Directive, with a special focus on data centers. So I want to spend this 35-odd minutes that we have with this star panel is to kind of talk about sustainability and the future of data centers. So let me begin by asking Mark and Martin if you can help us unpack the EED requirements, and in layman terms, please.
Start, Martin? I can start, let's say, with that. It's a directive by the EU, and this, let's say, has, in principle, two pillars. One is reporting, and one they give, let's say, practical solutions, practical directions for the industry, let's say, where they can, as a guideline, how to operate. Let's say first on the reporting. By, I think, 15th of May 2024, if you have a facility which is larger than 500 kilowatts, not IT load, but let's say contracted power, then you have to report all that information. And that's a very extensive list of what you have to report. It goes about floor space, IT load, energy efficiency, water usage, all of, let's say, up to for the industry, there's a lot of things are coming up to them on how to report on that. It's also a day job for a facility. It has also opportunities for the industry, like you, to automate that and give, let's say, some input for the directly for the reporting. But that will come up. And there are more topics. Maybe Mark can add to that, but we do it a little bit interactive.
Absolutely. Sure. Time is yours.
We'll take it both ways. So I think the real key, I think, to the EED, one of the most important features, is the fact that it's reporting based on standardized, on standards, so standardized metrics. So we've been talking about PUE in a couple of the sessions earlier. PUE is defined by a standardized metric, and none of you are going to remember this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's ISO IEC 30134-2. So that is PUE. If you're not measuring according to that standard, you're not measuring it. And the really important thing about EED is it's going to create a much more level playing field, because up to now, people have, in effect, often made their own PUE up. So this is really going to be an absolutely key feature. Equally, water is going to be in there as well. So water, WUE, is also a standardized metric. It's also part of the 30134 series. So this is, I think, the real game changer for the EED. It's going to create a very much more level playing field where people are, firstly, to Martin's point, having to report, and secondly, they're having to report against standards. So, you know, the greenwashing is going to go away. The third element, which I think people aren't really sort of seeing yet, but they will, is that the European Commission are going to be collecting data. One of the things that, as Martin said, is that they're going to be looking at data centers of more than 500 kilowatts capacity. So firstly, they're going to have to be national databases recording each of these units. So at the moment, we don't really know how big the industry is. There's lots of metrics that, you know, say we're consuming X amount of energy, you know, in proportion to sort of global or national energy output. But the reality is that they're going to have this data. They're going to start measuring it. And one of the policy officers said to me is that it took them 15 years to understand and regulate the glass-blowing industry. We are at the beginning of that curve, so you know, watch this space. And I think the final thing I'll say is that while this is actually Europe, it's the European Commission, you know that other governments around the world are going to be looking at this. They're all going to be doing something similar. It won't be the same, but it will almost certainly be similar. So very much watch this space. You know, it's the train's in the tunnel and coming towards us, every one of us.
Maybe to add to that, what's interesting also in the document is that also IT services will be incorporated.
Yep. Yep.
So the incoming and outgoing data, let's say in a data center, has to be monitored, has to be reported on. All the processing and all the, let's say, storage. And to a metric, this could be, let's say, the starting point to develop a new metric. As a part of, let's say, having also insights about the IT versus, let's say, how the facility is operating. Because if you have, just an example, if you have a very efficient server, you end up with a worse PoE. And the opposite, if you have IE in your data center, then it's the opposite. And that's strange. So there's no interconnection between, let's say, the IT, what's happening there, and also it could, let's say, a starting point also for not only the data center industry to be very energy efficient, but maybe also a good thought for the IT suppliers to have a rethinking about what they're doing and how they operate.
It's a really good point because up to now, you know, we've blamed the building. PUE has effectively, you know, really all it does is reference the building overhead. So we blame the building for performing badly. What we've neglected is the IT load is what actually creates the demand. And the IT load is growing. We're all looking for more services. We're all looking for more, storing more data. Whether that's good or bad is debatable in some cases. But the reality is we're consuming more. And I think as a society, we have to understand that it's not the data center that's the problem. It's the IT digital services that we're consuming, every single one of us is consuming, that is really the problem. And I think the Commission have recognised that, as you say, by doing that. How we measure the IT performance in terms of efficiency is debatable, but the focus is going down towards it. And I think there's a growing sense that this is an important factor which we've, to date, largely ignored.
How it should work? That's a different thing.
I don't know.
Let's say if I'm a co-location operator, I have to grab the information from my clients to report.
Is it going to give it to you?
Yeah,
It's going to get tricky.
Give it to you.
Oh yeah, okay. It already gives the solution, so.
Yeah.
there are some wrinkles to iron out.
I believe a few years ago at Huawei, we had a theme or a kind of a one-liner where we used to say, bit drives watts. And I think we were a little ahead of the times. So thank you, marketing. You did a great job. Because it is all about that. Because the input is watts, and the output is the bits that are being processed or driven. And if you can really measure those two, then you really understand the efficiencies, the effectiveness of the business. Obviously, this level of scrutiny will kind of drive meticulous inspection and approach to creating sustainable solutions, pretty much across the whole build, operate, end-of-life cycle of the data center, almost at every point. The goal would be to make it as sustainable as it can be. And so the question to the two folks on the operator side, maybe I'll start with you, John, first. Can data centers be successful in meeting this sustainability criteria?
I think on the technical level, a lot of the people in this room and obviously listening to Simon, we're already on that journey. You know, PUE targets reduction of water, even on the carbon, less embedded carbon in all of our processes, zero waste to landfill in terms of our operation. The physical nature of that, I think we're all committed to. There is a limit. There is a limit in terms of physics. There was a chart earlier that over 10 years we've probably made buildings 1% more efficient. You're not going to get huge amounts of drives. Yes, we'll raise the temperature by 1 degree. We'll save 3 or 4% on the energy input to cool that. The issue with the new regulations is the level of scrutiny and reporting. Now, we have over the last 3 years massively increased the amount of monitoring that we do. But we're still finding our feet on how we report that and how we use that. And that's been mainly driven by our customers. You know, we all in this room share a lot of the same large hyperscale customers, and they demand reports on everything. If you've got, say, a Microsoft, they even go down to how many teas and coffees were made in the month, what was the wastage on this, etc., etc. So they drive a lot of this. So I think on the physical level, we'll be able to measure, we'll be able to report. Whether we are already on that journey at Colt, you know, in terms of both our carbon agenda in reduction and in terms of our operation agenda. The big issue you've got if you're a hyperscale developer and we hand over the keys to AWS in Frankfurt on a 30 meg building, though it's our building and though we will operate the building in terms of we maintain it and its reliability, we can't control what they do. The accuracy of their reporting therefore impacts us as the registered owner. There's also confidentiality. What do you actually measure? Are you measuring the speed of the server, the efficiency of the server, the amount of traffic consumed into the building? That particular customer may have different technologies and platforms operate completely differently. Do you look at those separately? So I think in terms of all good operators in the business will embrace the standards because it will create a level playing field. You know, when you're bidding for a job, again, you know, to try and get a Microsoft on AWS and they're wanting an average PUE of less than 1.3 and this is how we do it. Well, I've seen 1,000 different ways of calculating PUE. And someone says, oh, ours is 1.18. So I think it will create a level playing field. It will make it a lot more transparent. It will help a lot of us in terms of our business. The bit I am sceptical on is the measurement of our customers' input, because they are very secretive about how their systems work. Do Google want to publish how efficient or not efficient they are compared to Microsoft? I don't know. So I think in terms of our customers, I think it's difficult. I think in terms of the hard facility, a lot of the people in this room and a lot of the businesses, a lot of people like yourself, a lot of the manufacturers are already shaping the way that we can report. But yeah, I think the big issue is our customers.
And I think, you know, from a purely global spread, different regions have different challenges. And Carlo, you are based in the Philippines. STT, I believe, is not just in the Philippines, you are in a wider region, India, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines. Most of the new regulations, legislations tend to originate from Europe, US, and that over time they kind of move into regions. How do you see your organization in the Asia-Pacific region, given these regulations? And in this case, you have a head start in the sense that probably customers in that region are still not expecting you to be ready. So how would you look at this in terms of being able to meet the sustainability criteria?
You know, I think you had that interesting question about whether we believe we can be successful in implementing sustainability in our data center builds. Quite frankly, I just don't think we have any choice. We all know it's the right thing to do. The hardest part is just aligning on how we all do it as an industry, right? Between the whole ecosystem. As you said, it's end to end. The bit drives the watts, right? So you gotta start from the end users all the way to the intermediary customers, really the hyperscalers, and then you talk about your customers, and then you talk about the builds, right? All of those things have to come into play. But really don't have a choice. Especially in the region where I come from, in the Philippines, we're really affected by climate change, right? We're one of those countries that there's 7,000 islands out there. You don't want to have 5,000 islands next, in a few years, right? So, but kidding aside, I mean, in terms of the regulations, I think it's the right thing to do. There's always going to be nitpicking in terms of how we report. But for me, I'm always the understanding that you just have to be, in certain themes like this, you have to be directionally correct. You don't have to be precisely correct. If we know we're doing the right things, and we all know it's the right thing to do, we have to be carbon neutral. We have to be more power efficient. All of this have an impact into the future. A lot of us probably won't be around in 50 plus years, right? But what will we leave behind? And I think that should be the driver in terms of how urgently we look at some of these things. The dollars and cents will measure out. In fact, it's interesting because as the customers demand it, there seems to be this growing critical mass that starts to happen with sustainability initiatives. Just a few years back, it almost seems like sustainability, especially in the region, except for the developed areas like Singapore and Hong Kong, it was like, oh yeah, you just have to put that in the RFP and you're done, right? But it's taken a much more serious tone in recent years. And I think it becomes embedded in the DNA of the companies. And you just start taking it for granted as part for the course. You have to be there. We have to be 100% renewable. Okay, well, that has to be that. And we're not going to build data centers that you can't power with 100% renewable. It also helps, of course, that you have a board and your shareholders that support that type of commitment. Fortunately, in our case in the Philippines, we have 3 companies that basically all prioritize sustainability on top of their agenda. Globe, ST Telemedia, Global Data Centers worldwide, and Ayala Corporation in the Philippines all have led sustainability. For those of you not familiar, Ayala Corporation is one of the oldest conglomerates and in fact operates AC Energy. And in fact, they've sold off all their coal-powered plants as a commitment. Like, we don't own coal, we're getting out of that business, we're going to go to renewables, right? Big change, big commitments. And it takes that level of making a statement because, at first it seems to be bold, and then people will just think, oh, it's normal. Just like anything else, when somebody does something new, you think it's great and it's exciting, but then when you do it so many times, it's like, oh, that's the norm here. And I think that's what's going to take for our industry to get through and be successful with sustainability, because I really do believe we don't have a choice.
And also clearly, when you have unprecedented growth, and we heard Frank mention close to 350, 400 megawatt of data centers coming up online. With that kind of demand, shortage of power, land getting expensive, areas where you can build, zoning getting tighter, countries becoming more sensitive to giving approvals. With all that kind of environment, it's kind of difficult to be thinking sustainability because you have no power, you're looking at sustainable power. You have no water, you're talking about sustainability. And so there's obviously an element of greenwashing that is happening, and with the reporting, hopefully this will precipitate, and it will be very obvious who is washing and who is pretty much clean. So if we talk now at a technical level, what is the strategy for the data center of the future, keeping in mind that we have to be sustainable? And there's a lot to unpack, but if I were to stay with the power first, and then we could move to cooling, and then probably end it up with low carbon construction. So probably we start with power, and maybe I'd let the 2 engineering folks kick off that.
maybe I would slightly different angle. If I
Please.
let's say I think the buzzword I think will be transparency for the near future. And why I'm saying that is, let's say, for myself, I see a transition of the internet to, let's say, a public infrastructure, similar to electricity or water or sewage system. It dictates, let's say, the prosperity of a society. If you have not a well-developed internet system or infrastructure in your country, you're lacking, you're behind. And if you take that position, also from an engineering perspective, and also understanding that you are in the middle of, let's say, an ecosystem called the society, then also your engineering will be based on that. So a nice example, for example, heat exchange, heat reuse, is as opening your eyes also to the environment where you are operating. And also if you are talking about balancing power, or let's say be a part of the grid system with all the wind turbines on sea, that's this opening your eyes and be a part of that. Otherwise, that will dictate, let's say, the engineering challenges what we have. And personally, and the next step will be, and that's the data center facilities in conjunction, let's say, with the environment. And I miss always one party, and that's the IT guys. I have a couple of examples where we have a very intensive discussion and collaboration with the IT guys, where they modify their servers, also how they operate their servers. We didn't have to install cooling systems. So we missed that last piece in the chain.
Mark, we heard Echelon talk about being a prosumer, and clearly that's the future. If you can unpack that.
Absolutely, I think absolutely right. I think I think Martin touched on it. It's about a community of interest. You know, is it about the data center in isolation? No, it can't be. If we want to be truly sustainable, it's got to be about a community of interest. It's about, you know, a requirement for power, maybe some form of micro-generation to support that, but actually having other businesses around that can also take advantage of that power, and possibly the waste heat as well. I mean, we all talk about heat reuse, great, but actually finding a customer for that heat is pretty impossible. So it's challenging. So I think what we'll hopefully see over time is more sustainable planning, and it really comes down to planning authorities and willingness of authorities to actually put businesses together collaboratively, if I can say it, and again create that sort of community of interest. And I think that's the only way we can do it. You know, we're at the point of sort of zero returns in terms of physics and making cooling work more efficiently, or you know, the power delivery. Yes, of course we can make marginal gains, but I think to be truly sustainable, we've got to go beyond that.
But in many ways, we've been oscillating between, you know, wanting to create data centers, zones, because that makes life easy in terms of zoning the areas, providing the connectivity, making sure power is available, and that's relatively practical to do. But then that doesn't allow you to create the ecosystem that you are saying, which then requires a different kind of zoning or distributed zoning. And so it's definitely a challenge for the urban planners, for the technical guys in terms of figure out how do you really...
We're a 30-year-old industry. I think we've got a long way to go yet to get it right.
Yeah, just again I love the term in terms of prosumer. It is about collaboration. It is about getting people to work together. We at Colt are looking at data centers where we have gas-fired turbines and we have solar farms, and we mix between the grid, the gas and the solar, and the gas is obviously, hopefully, hydrogen ready in the future, that wonderful word. But we've sat with the local community, and they have some issues with power in where we're generating this. So not only are we exporting waste heat off of the gas system, but we're also providing private wire connections to help out some of the local businesses. But you can't do that in the middle of an industrial estate. it's got to be part of an urban planning objective. In France, we've just had a couple of very large data center projects consented, and 2 years ago, in the building permit, I would have said, I'll put a heat exchanger on the boundary, and someone would give me a tick in the box. Now, I've got to demonstrate and fund the local network to take my heat to where it's needed as part of my social commitment. And that's done partly by legislation, but partly by collaboration and working together. So it's only going to work if we think outside of the actual box, outside of the data center, and drive that agenda. But there are so many hurdles. In the UK, the antiquity of our power connection agreements. Once I have the power, it's mine, if I don't use it or not. We've offered to share our surplus power. We've offered to off-grid and go on to self-generation so that the grid at its peak point can manage the load and therefore be able to give more power out on an aggregate. But they can't do it because the law says that that can't be done. Because when you give up capacity, you give it up for good. You're not allowed to do it. So we have to change legally the framework. As we said, it's a 30 to 60-year-old legislative system that we work, particularly in Europe, in terms of energy generation. And someone needs to tear it up and say, right, how do we share? Because there are people out there that have got hundreds of megawatts that they have paid for, connected to a grid substation, which they're using 20% of, because they're still building out their facilities. But the school down the road can't get any power because it's already allocated over there. We've just got to think about a more holistic, collaborative approach.
And I think also, you know, when you look at, especially in the area of heat recovery, heat capture, heat recovery, heat use, reuse, I think folks in Asia, Middle East, where we live, this is kind of not a problem because there's nothing we can do with that kind of heat at that level. We already have a lot of heat outside. We want some cold weather. And I was surprised when I visited Iceland last year and met some of the big players there. And what was interesting, one would assume that Iceland would be a great market for heat. Interestingly, no, because they also have a lot of heat through their water systems. But clearly, you know, in Asia, when we look at cooling and with the weather conditions we have, humidity, temperatures, and I know Asia is still forgiving, not Middle East where I come and I live in. How difficult would it to be sustainable because that whole option is off the table, literally?
It is one of the challenges because it is a warmer climate. We don't have access to ambient air that would be immediately able to cool. So that is one of our challenges. And for us, that's also the whole balancing act that you have to do between PUE and WUE, right? In fact, this is something that we're being very conscious of because of the industry. Sometimes you have these RFPs with PUE requirements, and that's that, right? But we've really been able to, as we designed, we've had to compromise and say, hey, you know what? It's better to save the water than get that incremental PUE, and we're insisting on that approach, even with our new builds. So it's doable. You have to live with your location. There's no such thing as a perfect location. Everything has its pros and its cons, and I've always believed you maximize your pros and you minimize your cons, right? And so in that region, cooling is definitely that challenge. And so there is a way to do it. The chiller technology has advanced. In fact, I had mentioned in my speech earlier that even in the retrofit area now, as we build on new additions to existing data centers, there's chiller technology that can be used because now you have microchillers that you can put in much smaller spaces than what was required in the past when you do your retrofits. And so I think technology as a solution to a lot of the problems we have, and as my colleagues have mentioned, it takes the ecosystem to put it all together and do the right thing. And so I think that's the prevailing theme that you have is even with the power. We have the same issues, as you had mentioned in the Philippines regarding power, because everybody's trying to hedge, and everybody hedges, and if you think about it, it's like, oh, you don't have any power. But no, it's like half the stuff's not being used, right? And so it becomes this game of, okay, risk and risk management, but it's risk management from individual sectors' points of view. If you can get the right players in a particular country together and look at the problem and solve it as a collective, it becomes a different problem to solve, because otherwise we're all solving our own problems. Power companies solving their problems with their rules, data center operators are serving our problems. The IT people are serving, are trying to solution their problems. And they're all a bunch of engineers most of the time, and so they're very geared about their solutions, and they will find a solution that optimizes their approach, but it's not the whole ecosystem. And I think that's the key in countries like Asia, but it's also the key in other countries around the world, that you got to look up to it. And I think it's great that there's more of this new progressive thinking that's more end-to-end in areas like Europe and markets like Europe. And I'm hoping to, in venues like these, really looking forward to exchanging some ideas and being able to be one of the ones that we can promote and really get ahead of the curve here in the Southeast Asian market.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very obvious that the data center will be at the heart of the smart city, and in many ways, like all of you mentioned in different ways, will be part of an ecosystem where it could be a prosumer, work with the grid to ensure flexibility in countries, reuse of heat, probably for swimming pools or tomato farms. But clearly, also not to forget use of low-carbon, sustainable materials to build the data center, because that's also clearly an area that needs to be studied and looked at, especially from an embodied carbon point of view. And so clearly, to wrap it up, if I have to kind of name a few technologies that are clearly at play, would be investment in renewables, investment in energy storage, in certain markets to take advantage of differential tariffs, and in most markets to stabilize the grid, because once you have so much microgrid connected, the grid impedance goes up, and so managing the grid becomes an issue. So clearly you need a lot of energy storage across to make the grid function the way it should. Obviously giving back to the grid, because now you have so much energy storage during peak hours. Heat capture, heat reuse, clearly prefabricated technologies to work on the time element, on the sustainable element, and even use of AI and machine learning to optimize. So clearly a lot of opportunities. Sustainability in data centers should be more like a program and not a project. It will be an ongoing journey, definitely to keep improving over every iteration. With that, I'd like to thank our star panel, and I guess we are a few minutes over time. Like we promised, we will be over time. I guess we have to stay back here to click some pictures, and then we should be off to dinner. Thank you. I guess we will stay back here for some pictures.
To Sanjay and to all of our experts, a huge thank you for, I'm sure you'll agree, a very thought-provoking conversation. I've been told, but correct me if I'm wrong, we're not doing a photo now. So, gentlemen, I will invite you to take your seats again. And please join me in thanking them all once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, our forum is at an end. A huge thank you to all of our speakers for such a rewarding afternoon and for sharing their success stories with us. Thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen, to those of you watching remotely. For those of you in the room, a reminder that the gala dinner is next, and there are shuttle buses poised to take you there just outside the main entrance. They will be departing soon, so please do head there straight away. We've got team members ready to show you the way. So enjoy your evening. See you next year. Thank you very much.